Now, so we will make a start. So thank you everyone for joining and welcome. This is AFA's professional registration workshop. Oh, somebody came in, there we go. Yes, so hopefully you're here to learn about professional registration. I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Mark Foy. I'm AFA's Associate Director of Professional Standards and Chair of the Professional Development Committee. So we oversee the standards, and I've got Bertha with me today if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Bertha Moron Espinosa. I'm part of the Professional Development Committee.
Thank you. So welcome. Some slides to go through today, obviously, but this is very much your session. So welcome as many questions, hands, comments as possible. Quite relaxed, shout out, that's fine. Stick your hand up, stick it in the chat. However you're comfortable, we'll get to it really. It's great you've come and obviously we want to kind of help you get through this process. So the more you ask, the better it is. Just before we start, there's not going to be much interaction in this, but if we can get, I just want to gauge kind of where people are up to. Just in terms of the reactions on Teams, can I get a little love heart if either you're already registered and looking to review, renew, or you've kind of gone through this before? Is anybody who's been around the block once on this? Can't see any. That's okay. Can I get an applause if maybe you've started to have a go and you've got a few more questions, or you kind of part way along? On there, that's good. And hopefully most fall into this one. Give me a thumbs up if actually you don't know much and you just really want to know what it's all about. There we go. Okay, thank you everyone. Just so I can know where to pitch some of the conversations on this now. Thank you. Okay, we'll make a start. As I say, use the chat. Let me just double check I can access it. Yeah, I did have an issue once where I couldn't see the chat, which was people were delays a bit. Bertha will keep an eye on the chat and chip in every now and then. So use that if you want as we're going along. Okay, so I'll just get a bit of the kind of overview out of the way before we get into the kind of forms and the process. So AFA is a professional body, but your accreditation will be against FedIP, Federation of Informatics Professionals, which is the umbrella organisation above AFA. That's also the umbrella above BCS or IRIN, CILIP, CHIME. A few other professional bodies of the wider informatics professionals are all kind of affiliated to that. So ultimately, once you complete this process, your registration will sit with FedIP via AFA as the kind of awarding body from there. So FedIP are the ones who set the kind of generic high-level standards, and it's AFA and the PDC who adopt them to make them relevant to analytics. For ease and time today, I'm just going to kind of use the term analysts and analytics, but I do mean the kind of whole family, whether it be data science, data engineering, data quality, coding. It is open to all, but just so I don't have to say that every time, when I say analyst or analytics, I do mean the kind of the full breadth of the term from there. And just to add up front as well, so there is a £25 annual fee, which goes to FedIP to maintain this register. So once you complete your application, you'll be asked to do that each year as well. That's on top of your AFA membership. I say that's for FedIP to support this. So I won't dwell too much on this one. So this is just, again, reiterating AFA does that on behalf of FedIP from there, and this is the route for that, the analyst family. And again, not to advertise other professional bodies, but again, roles where you might be more of the traditional digital IT, BCS, British Computer Society, maybe where you might see yourself. Again, we're all one family, we're not in competition, but say AFA is the route in for the analyst family from there, and hopefully why you've all joined today. I just want to touch slightly on the National Competency Framework, which some of you, hopefully most of you, are familiar with and seen that rollout over the last couple of years. A common question we do get is what's the difference between the competency framework and the registration? How I kind of simply put it is the competency framework is the skills you need to do your job, whatever that may be. But what we're looking for in registration is how you apply those skills. So no matter what level you're working out, it's that how you do it and why you do it not the this is what I can do, I'm qualified, I can do this, I can do that. So it's the how versus the what really is the difference between the two. On the application forms, you may have seen we had started to link them to make it easier for those of you who've gone through that competency framework process and looked at that to get them kind of talking to each other from there. But that's the big difference. Competency framework is what you need. Fresh registration is how you apply those skills. So it's great you've all come along today. You've made that first step for applying. Just a few points here of why you may want to do this process. So again, it's a bit of a, I always kind of talk a bit of a badge of honor to kind of validate your skills. And I think big one for me is that commitment to your career. Again, it's probably not so new anymore, but the kind of analytics kind of career and profession is relatively new. So it's great that, you know, this is the kind of first steps to keep that growing and moving on to bigger and better things. And it's that independent kind of review and assessment of your skills. So it's something I've used before. You know, if you're an analyst, you know, maybe your work's not being questioned or such, but you know, you've done something one way and maybe you're being challenged, you know, actually saying, you know, my approach has been validated and assessed by peers and I feel this is the right way to go is, you know, something that's really useful to have up your sleeve. Bertha, I'll bring you in just at this point, if anything I want to kind of the why or kind of what motivated you to do this.
Yes, and for me especially, and for my team, because I have to say all my team is professional register, it helped us, you know, to understand what we were doing. And it was quite a lot. And it helped us as well to reflect on the processes and all the thank yous, all some of the awards we have received. So it's helpful, definitely. And also, once you are professional registered as well, you are subscribed to the FedIP, which is the Federation of Informatic Professionals. And over there as well, you will have access to training courses, networking as well, and other opportunities.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, any questions just on kind of the general overview before we move on? I'll just pause for a second. No, okay. Okay, so what I'll do now is kind of just walk you through the process. Say, do shout out if you've got any questions or anything's not quite clear. I'm sorry, my voice is just gone. I'm just going to come. Yeah, might need to substitute you in some point at birth, but I will soldier on. So what you need to do, so hopefully, I know most of you said you're not very far along, but either you've had a look at some of the documents on the AFA website or via the FedIP hub, which is where you apply through now, which I'll talk a bit more about later. So the first bit to do is think about what level to apply for. There's 5 levels from associate, which is kind of like either like entry level, or it's kind of making a commitment to do the kind of full level. It's kind of like a mini level to apply at, and then ranging up from practitioner, senior, advanced, and leading from there. There's just a note there about only using official AFA documents. People may have done lengthy masters, qualifications, apprenticeships, and you've got, you know, probably quite a lot of evidence that could support this, and you may feel overlaps. But in order to assess it, we do need it in the correct paperwork and mapped against the standards. Anything that you may have completed at that kind of level, say masters apprenticeships, is great evidence, and you know, I'll talk a bit more about evidence supply in a bit, but that will just support your application from there. So applications, I think forms can be on the website, or this will take you now through to a link to the FedIP hub where you can download the forms from there for the levels. So I'll talk about the levels in a minute. But again, all the information you should need is on the AFA website and the FedIP hub, where it links you through from there. Once you click on the website, you'll be taken to this form just to register with FedIP if you're not already. So this is how you can get all access to that. So that's a bit about yourself, what level you're thinking of, and that'll send you through all your login details from there. Again, any questions with trouble with that, I think there'll be contact on the form, but again, reach out to the AFA inbox, info at AFA analyst, if you're having trouble getting on. So just talk about the standards now. So you'll hear us talking about P codes for practitioner level or SP for senior, AP, advanced from there. So these are the standards that FedIP set, and then these are what have been kind of translated to be meaningful to analysts. How we like to think about them is kind of like a journey. And this is what I said before about this is the how you go about what you do, not the what you do. So we just want to talk about, the methods you use to solve problems, how you organize and plan your work. Do you autonomously work? The accountability and responsibility you work at, how you communicate with others and collaborate with others, and then more overarching terms about your professionalism and your commitment to continue professional development. I'll probably say this a lot. We're not looking for the most shiniest, amazingest dashboard or most complex bit of script that does the most fancy output. It's really, really your decision making and why you do what you do. There's absolutely nothing wrong with giving us an Excel pivot table and defending it to the hill as to why that was just the best thing that needed to be done because it met the ask. As long as you can say why you got to that, that's what we're interested in. Not the here's something really amazing and isn't my code fantastic. What we want to know is why you did that. So I'll keep this on screen for a second and that will allow me to have a drink of water, but this is an example of the standards and what we're looking for at each level. Bertha, I don't know if you want to add anything at this point about the standards.
Well, as you can see on this slide, the standards are there as well to help you to reflect and to use, the STAR model, the situation, task, action, isn't it? What is that you actually do? And then you will need to reflect on this and then add the evidence that Mark is going to talk about it later.
Thank you. That was just enough time for me to get a drink. Yeah, so as Bertha said, there's a little section in the middle box there about the overall standard, and then the kind of prompt here for what we're looking for in evidence. And when we look at the STAR model in a bit, it's really good to kind of flag up and I say spoon feed the assessor, but to say actually this bit of evidence or this example I'm giving you now talks to SP1, talks to SP2 from there, and then you're kind of really showing that you're hitting the standards from there. As you can see from the guidance, say it's a lot about what problem were you solving, why were you doing it, how did you apply the methods, and what were the results from there. Again, if we look at SP3 organizing and planning, how do you identify resources, what was available, how did you make sure this would work, what were the outputs? Again, it's not talking about how great something is, it's what drove you to make the decisions you made and why did you make them from there. And then the next bit there, again, I'll just leave these on for a second to read, but this is just the other half, SP6 at communication. But again, why did you do this way is what we're looking for. I'll just leave that on for people to read. Okay, all these tables are on the application forms as well, so don't worry about speed reading them now. Again, we can get the slides out as well, but all this information is at the top of the application form, so you can keep referring back to it. What we also have after those standards is these contextual standards, which we've visualized here as like a thread that runs through it. And this is really understanding why you do what you do and how you fit into the wider healthcare setting from here. So what we want from applicants, is to have that awareness of your impact. We're all analysts all working in that family, and we hopefully know the value and the benefit good analytics can have. This is the opportunity to kind of talk about, why you do what you do and how it fits into there. And then it covers a bit about IG and GDPR from there. Now you make sure that you're kind of working safely and appropriately from there. What we're going to move on to in a minute is talk through a real standard. So you'll see some of these, and if they're not making too much sense now, you can see how they're applied. Final bit before we move into examples. So there's also a form to download which compares the levels for you. So this is just a screenshot of the difference from practitioner to leading. If we just use that top line example, you should be able to see kind of how they kind of progress at the level. So a practitioner level is you're kind of responsible for yourself. Senior is yourself and maybe a more wider scope. Advanced is wider, and then leading is in charge of department from there. What I would say from this and take away today, this is not linked to job titles. It's not linked to pay bands. So don't feel I'm only this, I should only apply at that, or I'm this, I need to apply at that. Again, this is about you and how you apply your skills really from there. So what I would recommend do is download this file and either just tick them or kind of eyeball them and have a feel about where you think you sit, just kind of a little quick self-assessment. You might all fall in one column and there you go, or you might flip between the two. And again, there's no right or wrong. No one's going to say, "Oh, you've applied too high. You shouldn't have done that." From there, what I would then, just to kind of reassure you on that, is Bertha and myself as assessors, we want you to pass and we will support you. So if we do feel maybe you've overreached slightly, or your evidence or your application wasn't fully there at the level, it's not a black and white pass fail. We'll get back to you feedback to say, oh, actually, we're just missing a little bit here. If you can just give us a bit more on this standard, that'll help you get you over the line. We've also had one this week where we've assessed it and we've pushed them up a level because actually it's done a really good application and they undragged it a bit. So we've said, fantastic application, and actually we're going to award you at a higher level from there. So do again reach out via the inbox again if you've got questions, or if you do speak to anybody you know is already assessed, and for a bit of advice on that. But don't worry too much. What I would also kind of warn against is the danger of probably underselling it if you think it might be a bit easier. So just a story from my own personal application. So when I did it for about 4 years ago now, no matter what level you applied at, you got awarded at practitioner. So I was a bit lazy at the time and I thought, well, I'm only going to get awarded at practitioner. I'll just do the practitioner form. But at the time I was the head of a department and it was really hard to answer questions about how I was given work and how I managed my own time when I was kind of lead a department. So I did struggle because I went it wrong. Obviously I got it in the end, but I probably should have thought a bit more about it and pitched myself right. So I would just take away, make sure you do just kind of put a bit of that self-assessment and work into where to land it right for this. Any questions on the levels from anyone?
Yeah, just to add what Mark has just said is, remember, as an assessors, we are here to help, to work together. So if we contact you, because each of us are allocated different applications, it doesn't mean there is something wrong. It might mean that we will like more knowledge and we will like to have a chat with you. Something might be missing. So we are there to help and to work together with you.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. Is we really want you to apply and to pass, and yeah, it's not a pass fail. Send it off. You don't hear from us. There will be communication if needed. Okay, so yeah, you're very quiet a lot today, but we'll move on. Hopefully, it's all making sense. So we'll talk through a specific example now and map it against the standards. So hopefully this is something that should be familiar to most of you. And we're going to talk about, I think, doing a bit of length of stay analysis on a frailty ward from here. So in this example here, you're the analyst and you're supporting some medical specialties and you've been asked for some support. So you'd need to get hold of some information and present it back. Hopefully, again, an example that should be familiar with many of you on the call, if not everyone. So Bertha mentioned earlier the STAR model, which is what we use for reflective practice. So alongside the application form, which we'll come on to in a minute, we ask for 3 reflective practices, which can be kind of examples analysis, example of projects, or kind of some quite meaty tasks that you've completed from here. And what we're looking for is say the STAR, so what the situation was, what the tasks were that you were going to complete, so like thinking ahead of time, what actions you took, and then what the results of that were from there. So we'll walk through that now. So using this length of stay example for this frailty ward, so the situation was that the analyst has been asked to join this MDT team to look at some look at the frailty team and to support that service from there. So straight away you can see in the red you've wrote SP7. So again, just by referencing the situation, we're starting to evidence the collaborative working that's being done. They've also flagged up C2, so the awareness. So again, the fact that as an analyst in that domain, they've been pulled in to support this, the awareness of how they can benefit the kind of healthcare service from there. So again, they give a bit of a background here that the organization had signed up to an acute frailty network program. So again, that was just a reason for this piece of work. And then they've said that they attended some workshops and discussions to gain a bit more knowledge around this. So again, they've referenced there in red SB9 that there's some continued professional development in the case from there. I'll come on to evidence in a little bit. Sorry, my throat voice is going. When we talk a bit more about evidence later, you know, an attendance certificate or something might be how you would evidence that from there. They've then flagged up that there was going to be a few different ways they could do this, and they were having those conversations. And then they've said again, they've attended a few more meetings and workshops and started to decide how they're going to present this information. So again, they flagged up SB1 and SB2 there around what methods they were going to use. What I will say for as we talk through this example, again, it should be something that you're all familiar with. And this is kind of the kind of little micro decisions that you'll make for every request that comes across your desk. You know, these will all be kind of just fraction of a second. You'll start thinking about this stuff, and you won't even give it a thought because you just do it. You know, you start thinking about where am I going to get this from? Do I know what I need to know? What we're looking for is breaking down those steps. So this might sound simple, but it is the kind of little decisions that you are making for every task you approach. So that's just outline the situation, and you can see they've started to hit quite a few standards from there. So now we're on to the task section. So again, they're talking about they were going to attend some more meetings about measurement and a few forums, and they were going to talk to people about what the best practice was or what the best way to do this. So again, they flagged up SB2 that again, they're putting thought and considering what approach they're going to use to solve this problem. It then became clear that they needed this flag in the system. So again, they had to look if that was going to be an issue. Again, data completeness, data quality, I'm sure is an issue you all come across. And actually now they're thinking, how will I get past this issue that actually this flag might not be the best quality, but it's what we need to do from there. They've then referenced that they were going to have to write some SQL scripts and pull it from the warehouse. So again, they're evidencing what methods they're going to apply. They've now referenced here that actually they don't know too much about frailty in the service, so they've arranged to speak to somebody in the service to get a bit more knowledge from there. So again, they've hit a couple standards with this around how they plan their time and how they collaborate with others. Again, this will be something that you'll do. You know, you might be writing your own script, but you'll speak to somebody else for a bit of advice, or you know, you might speak to somebody in clinical coding because you need the right codes or a bit of advice. So again, these little decisions, these little checks you'll do are all great evidence and examples of the thought and the time and care you're taking into your work. And then the last one there, they said they were going to develop a series of charts. So this is them referencing how they were going to present the data from there. So again, this is the communication. So that's the task. So this is kind of setting out ahead of time what you think you're going to do. And then onto the A for action. So this is now what they actually did. So they attended a course around measurement, and that's hit quite a few standards there. So they've learned more about methods, autonomous practice, you know, accountability and responsibility to seek out the course, and a bit about CPD from there. They've then wrote some scripts. So again, they've referenced here about having to speak to the business intelligence team to get a bit more information. So again, they're applying methods, choosing the best way to approach a task and working with others. It wouldn't be a piece of analysis without a pivot table because we all love Excel, don't we? So they've said it actually they've used pivot tables to present what they've done. Again, back to the point about it doesn't have to be a kind of world beating. You know, the fact that they've, you know, a pivot table is a great way to get a quick bit of overview, isn't it? So, you know, they're saying actually I've done this and now we've had a quick look at it, and then they might go on to present it a different way, which they do in a bit, but they're saying they've done this and this is now going to help inform the next steps. Again, now talking about what charts they're producing, stick it in SBC, obviously, because we all love them, and again, referencing why they're choosing that from there. They're then talking about presenting it. So again, communicating, so they took it to one of the meetings from there. Again, we'll come on to evidence in a bit, but that might be even an example of your slide deck if that's how you were doing it, screenshots of your dashboard if that's what it was, or even an agenda or minutes from the meeting. Again, all good evidence to say I presented this work from there. Reference that does took a bit more training there, Agile and Scrum, to help them deliver it. And they took responsibility for how they address those data quality issues, you know, whether that be workarounds, caveats, exclusions, you know, the describing that there. And then the last bit is the results. So hopefully we see a lot of this in your applications, but they produced the work and everybody loved it. So again, get that in. We love to see as evidence kind of feedback and compliments. So all the little emails you've got saying thank you, what a wonderful piece of work, all really good to kind of submit as evidence from there. I think last time I did this session, somebody was telling us about the praise folder they had. So hopefully some of you out there have got a little folder saved of all the nice things that get said about your work. So yeah, they've said, so as a result of this, the organization's now got a really good way to track frailty. And then they've referenced about how they handled some of the IG standards from there. I know that was quite a quick run through. And then when you've done it, it'll look something like this on a page from there. What I hope you took from that is that was probably quite a simple piece of work, you know, almost borderline routine ad hoc really from that. I know it was support a project, but actually talking through those steps and those processes is how you hit these standards. Notice again, we didn't ask about outputs, only why you did that output and what the result of it was, not what it was from there. So again, that's an example of say a simple project. You know, if you've got a bigger project and a bigger piece of work, again, you'll start to hit the standards from there. We do ask for 3 reflective practices. So this one has probably hit most of them. In some detail, I might be missing 1 or 2 from there. So again, if you write one or 2, you'll probably hit most standards. You might use your 3rd one just to mop up some of the standards that you feel you've not referenced. There's nothing wrong with kind of tailoring your example. You know, if you feel actually I've not spoke too much about communication in one of them, you know, your 3rd one might focus around doing that from there. Bertha, do you want to come in or add anything on the STAR model and reflective practice?
Yeah, I think the STAR model helps you to analyze what you did, and it's about reflection, isn't it? And that's why I keep saying reflection, and it's a way as well to show what have you learned and what was the outcome. So it has that analytical of step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4. And remember, please, that you need to submit 3 reflective practice, not less than 3. If you submit less than 3, then your assessment of the application will be delayed. That is very important.
Thank you. Yeah, and think of it as a story as well, you know, they're doing a bit of commentary on your work, tells a story about how you got to where you got to from there. So hopefully that's made the reflective practice sound a bit more clear. What there is on the second part of the reflective practice is just a couple more questions. You just double check that you all have this when you do it as well. We've had a few issues lately where this has been missing, and as I've said, it's caused delays. So this is just a few more questions after reflective practice about what went well, what went less well, what did you learn, what would you do differently. I don't know about you, Bertha, but I really like this. I think as an assessor, you find out so much about the task and the project, and it's really nice to read sometimes. And I do love a bit of honesty. As I say, we're not assessing how good it is, we're assessing how you got to it and why you made the decisions. So you know what, if it was a complete disaster, tell us, tell us about what went less well, what you do differently. Again, we want to know why you do something. It's really good to say, I did it this way. I joked about Excel before, but you know what? I did it this way because that was all I had time to do. It's all I had access to do. Actually, it was maybe the skills I had at the time. It would have been really good if I could do it this way, if I had more time, if I had more support from that. That's true reflection. That shows, even if it's not worked out as good as you'd hope, having that awareness of what you do differently is so valuable. And I do love to read that. Perfect.
And it also helps, to think how you have evolved, isn't it? When you started the project, maybe you didn't have the skills, and then you have to learn it. Some of these skills you have to engage with colleagues, and it helps you to reflect what went well. And then at the same time, it helps us to feel proud of what we have achieved. Because sometimes I don't know, when I started my career as an analyst, it was like we were in the corner, like a shop. I want this report, I want this dashboard, but we didn't really see the impact of our work. And this especially, I love this page, from the reflective practice, because it helps to see, oh yes, I made that impact, even if the project, fell or didn't go according as it should, but I learned something. What will I do differently next time?
Yeah, and it's a great little thing to have up your sleeve. Obviously, we've all applied for jobs one time or the other, but when you come into interviews and stuff like this, having this kind of fresh in your head and written out this way, you do 3 reflective practices, and you'll probably have 3 amazing interview question answers up your sleeve as well from there. And I say this reflecting is what's key to a lot of that. Okay, any questions on the reflective practice before I move on to evidence? No? So you are. I'm glad I did that interactive bit at the start, otherwise I'd be worried no one could hear me actually. Okay, on to evidence. So I've just got a few examples as I don't know if that's a bit fuzzy for everybody else, so I've noticed on mine it is. But I'll talk through this now. So alongside your reflective practice, so you'll tell us a story, you'll tell us, you've wrote a little script, or you got invited to a meeting, or you attended a course like that. So I'm just going to walk through what we're looking for when we say evidence. The reason we kind of pick this out, it might seem quite obvious, but sometimes it's the little things that get overlooked. Everyone's great at sending a screenshot of the dashboard or a screenshot of the code, but some of that more what we'll call softer evidence gets overlooked because you think it's not important. So I'll talk through these as to kind of why we want them from here. So again, this first one is just an example of booking onto a course. So again, a screenshot of that. What we ask and what's great is to label these evidence ones. So on that reflective practice, you might put, this meets standard AP1 and evidence E1 is what talks to it from there. Again, makes it nice and easy as an assessor to say, this is where I need to look to confirm that from there. So the next, again, this is sticking with the frailty example from there. So this is kind of just a bit of an example as to, I think, how they were going to collect the data and do the work. I will move quite fast through these just to give you a flavour for what they are. Of course, there's a screenshot of SQL there and an Excel pivot, as we've mentioned. Again, doesn't need to be page identifiable, just show this is actually the code I wrote. As I've said, we're not assessing the quality of your code. It's just, this is you saying this is the approach I took from there. So this is a screenshot of an email. So again, one of those thank you ones. So again, great work, thank you so far. And again, this is where you even if you don't have too many thank you emails, you might have a little email somebody said, this is great, can I have this as well? Or, they might make a little change and then you'll adjust your output based on that. So again, that's just little evidence of you responding to the feedback of others and, adapting your work from there. So again, this is just an example, I think, of reaching out to others about a DQ error. So again, speaking to data business intelligence colleagues, data engineering colleagues, coding teams, ops managers, asking those little questions. Great evidence again about collaborating, filling in gaps in your knowledge from there. Again, these are the things that people overlook. From there, so bit redacted this one, but this again, example of an agenda from a meeting. So this is just showing on this date, there I am on the agenda. I went and talked through a committee and they've said, who's in the meeting from there. They've just put job titles on. But again, evidence of you, presenting, communicating, working with others from there. A more obvious one now, but again, completing IG training, courses, qualifications. Most people don't overlook those ones. But again, examples of certificates from there, fantastic. And then this last one, I think, is a request to get information from coding from there. So again, email back and forth. As I say, these are the things that people overlook. That's why I've just taken a few seconds here. Some might seem really obvious, but actually it is that kind of softer stuff that we are looking for sometimes. And again, if it's all labelled and referenced to your reflective practice, it again, not just to make mine and Bertha's life easier, but it shows kind of how kind of organised and well laid out the application is from there. Some questions we get around evidence is time scales and how long it's relevant for. So again, we spoke about a piece of work from there, but quite a simple, I say simple ad hoc, but you might have done a really, really big project that you're really proud of, but it was 2-3 years ago. We don't set like a strict time limit on this stuff, because hopefully there's more recent stuff from there. It's okay to probably go back a couple of years, but I probably would beg the question, if all your examples were from 5 years ago, what have you been doing for the last 5 years, if that's all you got? So it's not like a hard time limit, but it would be good to see that there's still recent examples from there, but there's no harm in mentioning something that is a couple of years old, but you think it's really good. Something else people ask is if they've no longer got access to the evidence. So you may have recently moved jobs, but it was recent, but you've no longer got access to it from there. So that is a bit tricky, because you do need evidence of what you've done. Again, we can work with you, if you're struggling to find it, we can arrange interviews to talk with you from there. Again, this is where Bertha said, do reach out, we're happy to work with you from this, and to support you if you are struggling to evidence it from there. You might see what you can get hold of from colleagues or something from there. And then the other one is, what if it's a bit sensitive or contains patient information? Obviously, don't send patient information, but maybe whatever you want to show us, there's no way to not do it, or actually something's quite business critical that you don't really want to share. If you reference that, again, we can arrange team calls with you. So if myself or Bertha were the assessors, we'd have a Teams chat. You could just flash it up on screen, or you could talk us through your approach from there, and we can get around that. Again, don't let kind of complications getting evidence put you off applying. Again, we're happy to help and support you to get you through that. Okay, anything else on evidence before I go on to the application form? Bertha, anything you want to add about kind of evidence examples you've seen, or that you think sometimes I've missed?
Yeah, no, but yes, before we move to application form, so remember that the registration process has 3 main elements. So we have gone through the 3 reflective practices, which as we can see is examples of pieces of work, projects, developments of leisure to the aligned to the standards. And then we have gone through the evidence. As we can see, examples can include emails, presentations, reports, scripts. And now we're going to move to the application form.
Fantastic, thank you. So application form, nothing particularly out there, something you probably filled in a million times previously. So this is just to help the assessor know a little bit about you from here. So we're just looking for a paragraph about who you are and what you do. So there's a bit of example there about just what you do and where you've worked previously, what your interests are, are you involved with AFA and so on from there. Again, don't overthink this, as it's just to give a flavour for who you are. From there, one thing I will just mention, actually I should have mentioned this when I was about the standards, when I spoke about the kind of analytics family from here. So again, we talk a lot about analysis, but even areas like data quality or clinical coding, there is examples where actually all we're talking through now, you can evidence and assess from there, even if you're not doing like classical analytic work from there. So that where you might look at the standards to think, actually, I can probably hit the mark for a practitioner level, but you might struggle as you get more to a senior and advanced if you don't work in that more, let's say, traditional analytics role from there. But this is definitely the family that does cover data quality and a bit of coding if you were using that kind of coded data, or to kind of do analysis from there as well. But this will just give us a flavour about what your role is. So actually, it's where you say, oh yeah, I work in data quality and I use data to help improve stuff from there. Again, that's where we can get that feel. The next box below that is, again, anything to be proud of. This is not the time to be modest. Any awards you may have sneakily won, or any papers, presentations you've done at events and stuff like that, and stick it right at the top. Shout loud, be proud about it. We love to see the good work people are doing from there. Again, all examples of CPD, and nice to collect that at the top. And then there's just a very, very brief bit of qualifications, again, just to understand who you are really. So we're only talking about course titles, universities, colleges, years. Don't need to go into full details or anything like that from there. And then the next bit is just a bit about your career history. Again, no more than a couple keywords, sentence or two. No, I don't want 10 job descriptions of every post you've held. As I keep saying, it's just to get a flavour for who you are. So where you've worked, what jobs you've done, what types of things, where you've worked to and from. What the application form also has, which is really useful, is this evidence matrix from here. So as you're going through and you're writing a reflective practice, you can tick this off to say, I've hit this standard. So again, this is fantastic for an assessor to look at because we know exactly where to look to find that bit of evidence from here. So again, in this example, reflective practice 1 ticked about 90% of the standards, and then they've listed what evidence covers both from there. What you'll notice is, for example, evidence 8 against collaborative working is also there against C2. You can reuse evidence. Don't feel that I've used it once, I can't use it again. There will be stuff that cross-cuts and overlaps, so you can double reference from there. The only thing I would avoid doing is ticking everything. So if, maybe you have, but actually don't just tick reflective practice covers everything, reflective practice 2 covers everything, reflective practice 3 covers everything, because it does make it quite hard to see when it's so vague like that. So like this one here, where only some are ticked and only some evidence is listed against the standards, makes it dead easy for an assessor to see this is it, rather than kind of hunting if it's been quite vague from there. But when you've finished, you can see that you should have hit every standard. And this is where, again, reflective practice 1 might hit most of them. You can use 2 and 3 to mop up where you've missed, or indeed 4. We want a minimum of 3. There's nothing stopping you doing more if you're particularly enjoying writing it. What I wouldn't worry about is actually if you feel you've not hit a standard in your reflective practice, because you can't, maybe you think I'd be shoehorning it in, or you can't really do it justice. What there is in the application form is another box to say, actually, do you feel you've not done justice to a standard? So there's one here about, the example is demonstrating professionalism. It might have felt a bit forced to put this into your examples with the way you were telling them. So this is the opportunity to say, actually, here's a bit more information on that from there. Because what we don't want is kind of too artificial stories, or where you're kind of making it hit the standard from there. So tell the story as it happened and use that to help complement from there. What's also fine as we get to these C standards is to merge the cells or to combine information from here. So these are the contextual standards about where your role sits and kind of how you work with others from there. So in this example here, they wrote in a paragraph and they felt that covers C1 to C4. Again, that's fine as long as your paragraph is sufficient and hits those 4 points. You don't have to copy and paste or repeat from there. It's fine to use that bit of discretion from there to hit the points. Anything, Berth, you want to add on the form before I move on to the last bits about sponsors?
Yes, I would strongly recommend to use the matrix, because that will help you to see which standards you haven't evidenced yet. And the other thing that I would suggest is the renaming of the file. So for example, in the case that we have seen, the person went to an NHS elect course regarding measures. So then if the evidence on the matrix you write is E8, just rename the file as E8, measures course or training course. So it helps to have meaningful file naming convention.
Thank you. Okay, last bit of the form that we get a few questions on is, so we ask for a sponsor. This is just to kind of say what you've said is true in essence from here. Doesn't have to be anyone in particular. Can be a line manager, that's fine, can be a colleague. It's just anybody who kind of knows you and knows your work from there. Most people do choose line manager. This might be an example, we talked about, if you'd moved organizations and you've not got access to it, but you've managed to talk, you're cross-cutting, there's nothing wrong with kind of putting 2 on here, or you can put your old one if that feels most reflective of your evidence, even if you've changed jobs from there. But yeah, this is just somebody who can verify that, you are you and what you've said is correct from there. There's also an option to have your application verified by somebody who's already professionally registered. So if you know somebody who's already been through this process, we do have a kind of a very honor-based system that, someone's gone through this. So we allow them to assess your evidence. So again, this might mean, if you're having struggle getting stuff out, you can show it to your colleague who's already been registered, and they can sign it on your behalf to say, they've checked your evidence and they verified it's of good standard and it meets it from there. So it's just a little bonus thing we have if you do know somebody who's already been through the processes, they can kind of vouch for you, for lack of a better word from there. The last bit I'll just cover quite briefly is just the hub. Hopefully you've got this already if you've been downloading forms, but again, once you click the form on the AFA website, it'll take you through the login page, and then from here you can pick your standard, download the forms from there, and then just like again, you'll all know how to upload this. It's a standard. Again, select your file, attach it back up to us. What I'll just pick out from here is this little description box here. You don't need to put anything in this box, but this might be where, like we said about if you are struggling with evidence, for reasons, or if you feel like you do want to make a comment to your assessor about, you'd like to chat with them about something like that, just an opportunity to write any information that you might feel relevant for when your application comes in. And we're coming right near the end now, so just a couple key dates for people. So you're all in the workshop today. So the registration window opens on the 1st of July. So if you're not aware already, so the windows open quarterly. So 1st of July to the end of July is this next one. And again, it will then open in October and January and April and so on from there. There's a Q&A workshop in a month's time. That is, unlike today, there's no slides or presentations. That is just for you to bring your questions. Hopefully at this point, you're 99% there, 90% there. You just want to run something by people who've already assessed. So really good to come on to maybe just help with those last little bits from there. The link's gone in the chat now. Thank you, Bertha. So the registration window will then shut on the 31st of July. What I'll add to that is not to encourage late applications, but you know what, obviously life does get in the way sometimes. If you feel that you've got, 90, 95% application done and it's the 31st and you're thinking, oh no, I need to get this in, do reach out and let us know. And, we're happy to be lenient with that if you're kind of nearly there from there. We don't want to deter people and think you've got to wait 3 months to get it in. So again, that's where that Q&A workshop is really good to hopefully to tidy some of that up. But do reach out if you think you can get something in. What we then do is the Professional Development Committee will meet in August and we will allocate out the applications to assessors, and we give then the assessors a month to complete the assessment from there. What the assessor will do is, as Bertha said before, is reach out if there's any questions. Maybe we feel you've not expanded on a standard too much or there's a bit of evidence missing. This is where that dialogue will happen from there. So that's where there'll be opportunity to either resupply more evidence, arrange that team call to talk through something, or maybe make any more kind of minor or major tweaks if we feel there's kind of gaps in it from there. But just to reiterate, it's not a blind pass-fail. There will be that dialogue to support you through. As we keep saying, we want you to pass, we want you to apply. So you will be supported to get it over the line. That'll all be complete for September's committee. We kind of ratify the recommendations, and then following that you'll be notified of what no doubt should be successful and good news. And that is the last of the slides. Bertha, I'll let the opportunity for you to come in for any closing words, and then we've got a bit of time now, so any questions that anyone's now thinking of?
Yes, when I did it, my application, I have to admit, I found it very overwhelming because I didn't attend a workshop. But then when I attended the workshop, it helped me to understand more. I would strongly suggest to attend the Q&A workshop because this will help you to ask questions if you are filling the application form, if you have, you could ask specific questions on these workshops. And please, I know I might be like a broken record, but here we are here together to work with you, to help you. Yes, is Emily Sandoval, I think, has got a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. I finished my level 4 apprenticeship in data as data analyst. I was wondering if I can submit the evidence that I put in my portfolio for my application with you.
Yeah, so that'll be great evidence. I say we're still in the application form, but again, I've no doubt a lot of kind of what you did to achieve that will overlap with the standards. So that might be something where you think, talking through your apprenticeship, you might, that might be reflected practice 1 kind of done for you already. Okay, you have to put it into the STAR model, but that could be a really good start for you to do. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Ramja, do you have a question?
Yeah. Thank you so much. This is really helpful. And I also referred to a couple of a video from YouTube from the past, which was again very helpful. But I have a couple of quick questions. I think this has been recorded. Can we refer this recording back from anywhere, later date?
Yeah, so I think this will be going on to the AFA website and YouTube channel, I think, as well with the other ones. So yeah, it'll be housed there for people to look at.
Okay, and the slide where it talks about the C standards, some additional commentary on C standards. Although we provide the evidence, evidence for it in the reflective practice, do we still have to provide a bit more commentary on them here?
Yeah, so I'll just flip back to it there. Yeah, so what we're looking for is again, you can see from that, it's just a couple paragraphs. So yeah, the C standards are a core part of this. So yeah, in addition to what you've done in reflective practice, yeah, we're also looking for a couple bullet points. As we keep saying, it's really key to understand kind of how you fit in with the wider kind of healthcare and how your role supports kind of patient care and improvements from there. So as I say, you can kind of merge them to do kind of one paragraph there about how your role supports this and how you work towards IG and GDPR from there. But yeah, it is in addition to the standard, to the practice.
Okay, and the code of conduct. I think that's something that covers around 8 to 9 different areas, right? So do we have to provide the evidence for it as part of reflective practice, or do we have to provide anything on top of it? How does that work?
Yeah, so you could probably address that in the reflective practice. So I think one of the standards does talk about that. So again, you'll probably find it should come out automatically, by kind of telling that story about, if you're sharing information, if you're supporting others, that's hitting the standards from there, showing how you take that care and decisions into your work. So the link's on the website for the code of conduct for those not familiar with it. It's probably a good point, actually. I might get that in the slide deck for future ones as well. But yeah, what you'll find is by telling the story, no doubt you'll automatically hit it. So just make sure you reference it from there. But it is about, how you work with others and how you kind of make the decisions you do.
Okay, thank you so much.
Ayodele, we've got a question from Ayodele.
Yes, hello. Oh, thank you for this workshop. It's been so informative. My question is, all my work, personally, my work has been in academia. So as regards reflective practices, is it all right to upload work done in school as part of reflective practices?
Yeah, so is that, so it will need to be healthcare related.
Oh, it's data related. Okay, data related work done in school. Yeah, okay, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it might be one that happy to kind of reach out after this if you want to kind of talk through it.
Okay,
And say
okay.
the kind of relevance to healthcare is the key thing that AFA does need to assess.
Okay.
But happy to kind of talk through it outside of this if you want. We can probably go into a bit more specifics about that. But if it was purely kind of academia.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay, I think that's the end of the hands. I'll just double check the chat. Nothing snuck in there. Okay, right. Thank you for your time then, everyone, today. I hope that's been informative and hopefully busted a few myths around applications. So hopefully over the next month or so, we'll see applications rolling in. So thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.